Katie from Nerd Church here in the first of an ongoing series of scripted videos about the seven sacraments. There will be seven. This is the first one, which is baptism, because baptism is the first ceremony, is the first ritual of initiation that people go through. And depending on exactly who and how the baptism is done, it either makes someone into a Christian or it makes someone into a Catholic. Probably the easiest way to understand how this works is if we return to the distinction between licit and valid and invalid. So basically, licit means that everything is done precisely according to the rules of the Catholic Church. Valid means that things weren't done exactly according to the rules, but the act still occurred. The baptism happened. It wasn't done quite right, but it was still a baptism. Illicit means that it didn't happen according to the rules, but again, illicit doesn't mean invalid. Invalid means that something went so wrong that it was not a baptism. So let's talk about how this happens. Okay. So we have a licit baptism. What does that do? Okay. So typically, if you're Catholic, this will be done in infancy. Because it's, the Catholic Church has abandoned the idea that unbaptized babies don't go to heaven, because that just did not feel good. That did not feel right. It was doctrine for a while. Now it's not doctrine. Most people are happy it's not doctrine. But the point is that most parents will still have their babies baptized as children because, again, it's recognized as an exorcism ritual that gets original sin off of their soul, so that, maybe they won't be as much of a jerk, we hope. But also it signals a commitment that the parents and the community are making to raise this child as a Catholic. Which is why sometimes, a family will go to a family who hasn't been particularly active in the church might even go to their parish and be like, we want our kid baptized, and they'll be like, well, are you going to raise them Catholic, or do you just want this for social reasons? And sometimes the parishes will do that, and sometimes they won't. And it can create a lot of hurt feelings, but it also shows how seriously baptism is taken as a thing. Now, that's illicit baptism, right? It's you've got the parents have gone to whatever classes or instruction are required. The baby is in their white little gown that has the baby is in regular clothes because the white gown happens after they've been baptized. Or sometimes the white gown will be on there beforehand, and they'll bring an extra little cloth blanket or something to wrap around the baby for their white garment. There's varying ways to do it. But the point is, the baby gets water sprinkled on them, they get anointed, and they're baptized, and that's good. Now, what happens if an adult needs to be baptized? Well, that brings us to valid. Because according to the Catholic Church, anyone who is baptized with water in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, if the person who is baptizing them has a proper understanding of the Trinity as explained in the Nicene Creed, even if the person performing the baptism is not a Christian, that is a valid baptism. So, if, say, a Baptist wants to convert to Catholicism, they do not have to be rebaptized because they were baptized already. That was a valid baptism. They are a Christian. Now, sometimes an adult will show up and want to convert, And there will genuinely be real question about were they baptized at all, right? They know that they went to church, they answered some kind of an altar call, they don't remember what anybody said, there aren't any witnesses who can clear things up. So in that case, they'll do what's called a provisional baptism. A provisional baptism is where they literally say, if you were not already baptized, I baptize you. And that's usually done in private, and it's not done lightly because, again, it's in the creed. I confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. That's in the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed. One baptism. Now, what happens if the baptism is invalid? How can that happen? Well, there's a couple ways that it can go wrong, and one of the ways that it can go wrong is if the person doing the baptism doesn't have a proper Trinitarian understanding. That's part of the reason why Catholics, recite the creed on the regular. Because in an emergency, any Catholic can perform a baptism. Now, that's generally discouraged simply because that creates a situation where somebody might be baptized or might not be baptized and they don't know. And also this is something that, if people are running around baptizing people willy-nilly, that can create a lot of drama and hurt feelings, especially if the parents' wishes are not being respected. Not like there are a lot of there are a non-zero number of people of my generation whose parents quit going to church very much, or who were going to wait to have the kid baptized, and the kid went to grandma's house and grandma did a baptism in the bathtub just to be on the safe side. Yeah, that creates drama, and it's not cool. In the past, it actually created some really serious problems. I'm referring to, there's a really good book about this that was also made into a movie. I haven't seen the movie. The book's really good, called The Kidnapping of Edgardo Moritara, who was a Jewish boy. His family had employed a Italian Christian girl, an Italian Catholic girl, who, when the little boy got sick, she freaked out and baptized him, and the Catholic Church, unfortunately, sought and was able to obtain custody. And he grew up and became a monk. And now they really don't encourage you to do that because of things like that. But depending on the circumstance, it might be something that would be necessary. So, again, you don't want the priest to mess up the baptismal formula, which was actually something that happened in Arizona. I will not name names, but there was a priest who, because he wanted to emphasize the community involvement aspect, he started saying, instead of I baptize, he started saying we baptize, right? Well, baptism isn't a communal act. It's something that one Catholic or one Christian is doing for another person, right? Or even just another person who wants to give baptism, right? So, as a result, they literally had to go through and send out letters and try to track down every single person and, basically like do a recall. Hey, your baptism may not have been valid, so you should probably go get baptized again. Which created paperwork. The church handled it on, as nicely as they could for the people who had been affected by this, but it was not good. People were not happy. So, getting a licit baptism, or if not a licit baptism, then a valid baptism, is something that the Catholic Church puts a high premium on. Now, is it possible to be baptized? And I should mention, there are two valid forms of Catholic baptism. One is immersion, which is sprinkling, where the water is just dumped onto the head, often with a little decorative seashell. Sometimes you get to keep the decorative seashell if it's just like one kid getting baptized. Or immersion, where you just go down into the whole pool, which was the practice in early Christianity, and some churches still will have a immersion baptistry for, especially for adult converts, because it's kind of cool. My church just does, my parish just does sprinkling. Other parishes have like the full font that, the full like jacuzzi kiddie pool font that you go into. Not blow up. It's part of the architecture. It's very classy, but there you go. So it has to be done with water, and it has to be done with a particular formula. And if it's not done that way, then it's not a valid baptism. This is where I should mention that although infant baptism is the norm, there are starting to be some families that feel that it's better to have the baby blessed or to have some kind of a naming ceremony and then let the child choose to be baptized or not. I don't know. I can kind of see that as somebody who didn't get her sacraments on schedule, because my parents were like, there was family drama. For me, it always meant, there was always this little piece of like, well, I'm baptized, so I'm always gonna be Catholic, and they can't really even kick me out. Like, I can be excommunicated even, but I can always come back. And that's something that is kind of, I can see where for some kids, not being baptized as an infant could create issues. I can also see people where the fact that they aren't locked in until they chose to be locked in as a small child, on the other hand, that gets into issues of like, can an 8-year-old meaningfully consent to a religion, to a ritual of initiation? The point is, there's a lot of like, what is the proper age going on debate that hasn't been settled yet. But for right now, what you need to know is the norm is infant baptism. However, baptism can occur at just about, and does occur at just about any age. Particularly for, and this is where I've been kind of burying this in the video because I don't like to talk about it, but there are groups that consider themselves Christian, such as the LDS, such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, who have an understanding of the Trinity. Well, they don't have an understanding of the Trinity. They reject the Trinity. Or they use a different baptismal formula, in which case those baptisms are not licit and they are not valid. And when someone from that faith tradition chooses to become Catholic, they have to get baptized again. On the other hand, a lot of those religions also don't recognize Catholic baptisms as valid and make you get baptized again. So, turnabout is fair play. So anyway, that's baptism. I hope you enjoyed something. I hope you enjoyed the thumbnail of the delightful stained glass. And have a good day.